Ted Cruz is so concerned, very concerned about government waste. But rather than canceling himself, a prime example of government waste, he's actually targeting National Science Foundation grants that fund cancer research and road safety. Now, before I tell you what his reasoning is for targeting these programs, do you want to take a stab at it, Cenk?
As usual, it has nothing to do with being woke. They're trying to get rid of things so that they could do tax cuts for the rich. But details of this story are hilarious and disturbing. Anna, tell us about them.
Yes. So this week, a press release from the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation read, Cruz-led investigation uncovers $2 billion in woke DEI grants at NSF. Releases full database. Ooh, okay. So this so-called database was what Cruz used for an October report. So this is what he was up to last October before the election had even happened. But in the report, he claimed over $2 billion of NSF's $9 billion budget went to left-wing ideological crusades masked as academic research. Oh my God, that sounds serious. I mean, we got to look into this, right? So Cruz and the Republican Party argues that the funding was in fact diverted toward questionable projects that promoted diversity, equity, and inclusion or advanced neo-Marxist class warfare propaganda. That sounds scary. So what were these programs like? How were they pushing neo-Marxist propaganda? Well, included on the list were projects aimed at finding better ways of synthesizing new medications, studying how to make self-driving vehicles safer, and figuring out why some proteins start to malfunction in ways that can lead to cancer. In other words, Marxism. Cenk, back to you.
Marxism. Okay, I actually know some Marxists. They're some are lovely people. Some of them I have huge fights with and disagree with. Science is not Marxism. Like the way that the right wing, especially their leaders, both in media and politicians, use the word Marxist, is just, especially Ted Cruz, who's really well educated. He knows it's not Marxism. He's doing it because he thinks his own voters are uneducated. And he's like, oh, I could just call fighting cancer Marxism and then everybody will hate it because they have no idea what Marxism is and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So I could just lie to them over and over and over and they'll never catch me. And so it's really totally disgusting. So Anna, there's two different things to me here, right? One is, do you want to end some portion of how they appropriate money through these in the future? Okay, and I think that's an interesting conversation. Then there's what Ted Cruz is doing now, which is the money's been appropriated. I'm either noticed or am pretending, depending on the project, that there's some DI component to it. So I want to cut off all that funding for cancer and for kids learning about science, et cetera, under the guise of fighting DEI. And obviously that's gross and totally unacceptable. But I do want to talk about what he's referring to.
Yes, okay, so I'm gonna give you some specific examples, okay, so you understand what we're talking about here. So one of the programs and people targeted by Ted Cruz is Corinne Brevik. She's a physicist who actually used money from an NSF grant to help middle schoolers host an interactive broadcast during the solar eclipse so more students could experience what it's like to be in the path of totality. Plus, I mean, you want kids to be excited and passionate about science. Like this seems like something that's exciting for kids that could potentially spark a passion or interest in the field of science. So in other words, Marxism. But interestingly, Also on that list was a grant given to UMass Amherst to study linguistic differences between Hebrew and English. The $226,000 grant was flagged by the Texas Republican senator's team as having an inappropriate focus on gender. But according to the description of the research in Cruz's own database, the sole mention of gender in the grant's description is in reference to the fact that the Hebrew language, like many, assigns gender to nouns. I mean,
come on, man.
It's just so sad. So now Cruz is apparently in favor of policing not just the English language, but also Hebrew, I guess. It's unacceptable.
Get himself in trouble with that.
Yep. So obviously many of the research proposals Cruz listed seem entirely unrelated to DEI. Most likely they were flagged because they included language about increasing participation of women and underrepresented groups in science. And that's because Congress has literally mandated NSF consider those factors in grant making since the 1990s. So in order to get approval, if you're applying for a grant, you have to abide by what the regulations are calling for. And since the 1990s, Congress has mandated that these NSF grants consider factors, like diversity or women being included in the programs.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about. So look, if you want to use that excuse, you could literally cancel every program there is in this department, because they all were mandated to say how it would help in bringing in either more women or minorities or people from disadvantaged backgrounds, et cetera. So, and why does he want to cancel programs that educate kids and help science and maybe cure cancer? Because it doesn't help his donors at all, but giant corporate tax cuts do. They have to huff and puff about all these cuts so they can say, oh, we did all these cuts, which like amount to a hill of beans. So it's okay for us to give a $4 trillion tax cut to my corporate donors. So that's what this is actually about. But if you actually are concerned and you say, hey, I don't like that this department is asking everyone who does a grant to tell us why it would help these other communities, right? Okay, then have that debate in Congress. And by the way, you'll probably win that debate if you're right wing. And so in the old days, the left would have won that, and we did win that. That's why it was mandated from the 1990s to now. And nowadays, probably the right wing will win on that and say, hey, you're gonna do science, but you're not gonna care if it helps women get into science. You're not gonna care if it helps disadvantaged kids get excited about science. You're not gonna care about any of that. And they have the votes, they could win it. But you've got to, at a bare minimum, even if we vehemently disagree with that, you've got to do it the right way. You have to actually pass laws. You have to go through Congress. You can't say, oh, Congress appropriated the money, they did everything they were supposed to do, but I'm gonna cut it all. And it barely saves any money. I mean, compared to the tax cuts, it's nothing. It's all theatrics and marketing, right? And then finally, like my experience, Anna, is I went to a great public school in New Jersey for elementary through high school. And we had great science programs. We had psychology classes, philosophy classes in high school. And we were one of the better high schools in the nation. And it was a public school. And I love that place. And the athletic director took over the year after I left. And he liked me because I was, really good middle linebacker, and we had a great football team, et cetera. So he told me his plan to cut all of that, and we're gonna focus on the basics, math, arithmetic, and and reading and all that. I was thinking, oh no, he's gonna ruin this place, right? And he did. And now that school is not nearly as good. They took away those programs, and it started going straight down. No, you gotta believe in the kids. You gotta teach them these things and get them excited about school so that they could do amazing things in the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, public schools were lit back in the day. Like I remember one of the electives I had in middle school was a drafting class, which I was terrible at, but still, I mean, it was cool. Like, it was cool to learn what drafting is all about. I had a sewing class as one of my electives. Back in the day, there was home ec, which I wish was still part of the public education system, because it wasn't just about baking a cake. It was about your personal finances, how to balance a checkbook, that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of education is incredibly valuable to kids. And to see it gutted is just so incredibly depressing. But Cenk, I want to go to this graph showing the difference between how much the American taxpayer spends on defense versus the National Science Foundation. That's a good visual to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. Obviously, we're talking about the 2025 annual budget. When it comes to the Department of Defense, we're talking $850 billion, as opposed to the National Science Foundation, which allocates $10.18 billion. So it's pretty gross to see where the priorities are here for Republicans like Senator Ted Cruz, but it is what it is. I do want to end on somewhat of a positive note, because you had some sort of exchange with Elon Musk on X. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so they say that they're gonna cut defense. I had the exchange a little while back saying, hey, if you want, put me in, coach, I'll cut $400 billion. Today, Donald Trump said they're gonna cut half the defense budget. Are they really? Of course not, right? But the fact that he's saying that, and he's saying if we negotiate with Russia and China and they cut half their budget, which they're not gonna do either. But the fact that he's saying it is reinforcing over and over again that the MAGA ideology is cut defense. And I love that. And so today I wrote, I'm excited about the possible cuts at the Pentagon, and that Trump, Musk, and Hegseth all agree. I hope it's not some useless woke program that they cut to save a couple of bucks. Let's go at the heart of the military industrial complex, corruption. That would deserve a lot of credit. And then Elon Musk replied to that saying, dramatic changes for the better are coming. If massive change is not made, America's security is in danger. So guys, proof is always in the pudding, right? So they're either gonna do these massive cuts that Elon Musk has now promised twice in response to my tweets and in other places. Donald Trump Jr. has agreed, Hegseth has agreed. Now Trump is saying maybe up to half the budget, exactly what I started with. So, but it's up to MAGA to hold them accountable, because MAGA definitely wants it. And so are they gonna do what their base wants, or are they gonna do what their donors want? And that's the central question here. So far they're promising to do what their base wants, but they gotta actually do it, and it hasn't happened yet. If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.